Okay, everyone. I hope this is sort of fun. I noticed, I noticed my drawing is kind of hefty, so maybe I guess I made you draw a 40-year-old person or something. But anyway, it's the same proportions whether you weigh 220 pounds or 150 pounds. It's the same proportions. That's what we're looking for, about how long are the arms and so on. Like I said, this canon is a set of rules developed in the Renaissance, referring to a nice average. So we always have people that tend to be more this way or tend to be more that way. As we start the women's drawing today, most women are smaller than most men. We're going to use the same 8 heads tall system, but just imagine her 8 heads tall is on a smaller piece of paper than his 8 heads tall. Same system. So normally her drawing would just be smaller, but let's use the whole piece of paper here. So why not? Other things, sometimes if a person is really not that tall, especially this might be a woman, her head might be slightly larger in proportion. That would not be unusual at all. If a person is very tall, their head might be smaller than this in proportion because there's so much height. So let's say I was drawing a very, very tall person. Head might be just a tiny bit smaller and the body more stretched up. Like I said, smaller person, maybe a very slightly larger head in proportion. But these things are mostly the same for almost everybody, just some slight differences here and there. Our system we're going to use for women is actually very similar to him. We're going to make some changes here and there, and it's going to look distinctly feminine, where his looks distinctly masculine. So first of all, we're going to start with the top section, where we have an oval shape here. It has to touch the top and touch this line. Don't draw it smaller, remember. And then you can make her look, whatever you want her to look like. But we have eyes halfway down, and then, divided into 5 equal sections. And then a nose from there to the chin, a nose about halfway down again. I'm going to try and make her nose just a tiny bit smaller than his nose because women tend to have slightly smaller noses. Came out looking almost the same. Eyebrows, I gave him heavy eyebrows. A woman can certainly have a heavy eyebrow, but I'm going to make hers hold back just a little bit because that tends to look more feminine, to have I guess you could say, a more sculptured eyebrow. And then other things I could do, I could emphasize this top line at the top of the eye, which women, when they put on makeup, they end up with a darker line there. And then when we draw her mouth, it might be slightly less wide. So pupil to pupil, that's as wide as it's going to be, but maybe we'll bring hers in a little bit closer to the nose than the chin. I put that in the middle, so I need that higher. So I'm going to try and make hers a little shorter. And then I tried maybe slightly more of a puckered lip to it. What is that line? Okay, so here's my girl's mouth, very slightly smaller than hers, but doesn't like every girl has this mouth shape, but compared to a brother, hers may be more like that, and his might be a little wider, more square. And then any type of hair you want on your girl. I'm going to have her hair kind of pulled back in some kind of a ponytail thing. Okay, that's her hair. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is work on the shoulders. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to add these ovals again, but we're going to use them slightly differently. So with her, we're going to add 3 ovals here for the shoulders, same size as the head. I know we're drawing a girl, so hang in there because we're referencing these 3 ovals. We have to make sure we've drawn them the same size, even if that's not quite how we're going to draw her. So as you know, most women don't have shoulders as wide as most men. So instead of getting a head on either side of her shoulders, we're going to move in a little bit on this. So his pretty wide. Hers not as wide, so we're going to bring this in from the 3 heads wide. So just a little bit, and then you can look at the woman you're drawing and how much is her shoulders come in. Oh, I need an ear right here. Okay, and then we have a maybe more slender neck. Just a little bit more slender, still has to be able to hold up the head. And then you don't have this emphasis on this muscle here on the back side. So when I draw her shoulders, it'll be a little bit more of just a gradual line coming down here. So it'll be a more, she tends, not always, but tends to be less muscular, so kind of a softer line. The shoulders need to end up on this line again. This is really important for the whole drawing to come out. Don't make the shoulders too high, don't make them too low. So right on this line. So all of a sudden she's looking distinctly female, and we just started the drawing because she has shoulders less wide. Now we're going to put in the 2 ovals again side by side here. I'm going to make sure we've drawn them just as big as we did before. We're just going to use them a little differently. And then I want to be able to see them in your drawing, like I said, so erase it lightly if it's bothering you. So her chest is not, her rib cage is not near as big as his is. You notice her shoulders aren't as wide. So when we have her armpit's going to be way in here, so it's already further in than the rib cage is. Her rib cage is smaller, so instead of going around and down, we're actually going to taper in a little bit. So for her rib cage, around the ribs and tapering in for a waist. Her whole rib cage is structured a little smaller. Now see how that looks much more feminine because she's smaller in the rib cage than he is. So here's my 2 ovals, where his was way out here, hers is in here. Also her breast would be, it depends, right? We all know that. So don't draw these giant circles with a dot in the middle, just kind of for the sake of our drawing, something like this would be fine. And then it would just depend on the person. So more of a curved line right there, and however you want to do it. She has a belly button in the same place, just below this line here. When we go to put her hips in, we have our 2 ovals again. Now this is where there's also some differences. She has a smaller rib cage. She also has what's called wider hips. Now her hips, here, try and put these ovals in the same size again. Her hips are built different than his hips. His hips, legs are straight in his hips, but her legs are kind of built in a little bit tapered. She's made to birth children and he's not. So there is a structural difference here. I do want to say she doesn't have an appendage called a hip that we attach to the side and stick on. It's just more how we draw these same lines. So her hips are at their widest right at the top of her legs. So be right here on this line is where her hips are the widest. So we're going to come out a little bit, and then we have, just like him, we have just legs coming down. So instead of adding a thing called a hip, we just have a slight difference in these lines coming down. So we're going to go from this natural waist here over the hip bone, and then gradually having a slightly curved line coming down here. This time it's angled out, when his were fairly straight down. So over the hip bone, and then all the way down to this line, slightly angled line, as opposed to fairly straight line. Both of them are curved. On every line on a human being is going to be curved one way or another. This is indented, curved out, what, convex, concave. There's no straight lines anywhere. So, oh well. So here we have the top, the widest part of the hips is also the top of the legs. And then we're going to work on putting her legs in. So we have a difference here. His legs are pretty straight down. Her legs actually angle a little bit coming down. That's why the world's fastest man is always faster than the world's fastest woman. Her legs are set in a little different. And so she actually has to work harder to run than he does. He's just set in like this, and she's kind of working sideways just a tiny bit. So anyway, so as we draw her legs, there's an angling here. So as opposed to being straight down, I usually kind of give myself a guide. so I make sure I get them in fairly straight before I draw them. Something like this, some mermaid lines, just to give myself a guide, so I don't, if I need to bring her legs in, I also don't want them to be bent or whatever. So she has knees in the same location, so you can give yourself a reference there for your knees. Just like him, the upper thigh is rounded. We already started out rounded. When you get down towards the knee, just in a little bit. So the outside of the leg rounded, and then around the knee a little bit. Inside the leg, same thing. It's a little further here, indents a little, then around the knee. It didn't quite work. Sorry. Maybe be in the middle. Here, indents and around the knee. Here, indents a little bit and around the knee. Now, just like him, on the back side, the calf muscle is behind the knee, so you go immediately down to the calf. Typically, well, woman's smaller, but she often has smaller, what we call smaller bone. So her ankles are going to be just a little bit less wide, like those like flexible legs. So our ankles down here, just purposely make them a little bit smaller. So bringing down the calf muscles, smaller ankles. And then I'm going to kind of make her, I give her kind of a bent leg. Sorry. I'm going to make her feet the same way, kind of pointed out towards us. So we'll start with a big toe, and then I'm adding 1, 2, 3, 4 more toes, slightly curved line here, here, and I'm going to add some nails on top of her toes. So it's a very stylized foot. So here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, add some little nails. This isn't a very pretty foot. Okay, something like she has. Anyway, that's okay. We're working with proportions. Notice how I bent her leg just a little bit, and that's why I drew those lines in the first place, to try and make myself get some straight legs. So it helps when you do kind of build a structure for yourself to straighten that out. Now it's hard because her arms are slimmer. You're gonna not want to draw them so long, but her arms are just as long as his arms are in proportion to her body. Remember, she probably has a smaller piece of paper than his piece of paper. So she still has elbows here, she still has her wrists down here, and she still has a hand down here. Her arms are also halfway from her hips to her knees, if they're stretched out really straight. So she has the same muscles, they're just a little slimmer. So as I draw her arm in, just breaking that in, arm, arm, and then, you know, with her, because her shoulders aren't as wide, her arms might rest here on her hips. So I'm going to draw her thumb here and her hand there. And then coming down on this side, anyway, hand about this big down here, lower part. So same muscles, just not quite as big, probably. There's lots of muscular women who work out and stuff. What she's holding, but anyway, okay, so here's our man and our woman. So our big changes were the rib cage, big difference here. She's smaller, we tucked in, angle in for the rib cage, where his is a little bit straighter down, and then we angle back out here for the hips. The widest part of the hips is right here at the tops of the legs. So if you wanted to add, he got to wear a swim trunk, so you can give her some type of a bathing suit if you want, or whatever. Just don't cover up your lines when you, if you draw something on there, so I can kind of see. Anyway, so that's our basic man, basic woman. But it's important to remember arms much longer. When you're drawing real people, you get to where you look, oh, that's right, the elbow's going to be where the waist is. So you look at the person, where's the elbow, where's the waist? Okay, that lines up. And it helps you kind of proportion out your drawings. Lots of length in legs. Now men wear their pants lower so you don't see the length necessarily, except maybe from the back, but there's a lot, half your body is legs, and so that's really important to notice as well. So she came out to be a Olympic swimmer, but anyway, I hope that helps. So you're just gonna draw this as best you can. The most important thing is getting all these things in the right location. And then once you've done that, take a photo of it and send it to me, and then that's all you have to do for today.